YouTube bound community, Shangri-Las fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we're here today joined by author Lisa McKinney of this incredible book, Dressed in Black. This massive tome about the Shangri-Las, a wonderful group, a misrepresented group, and an underrated group, if you will. Lisa, thanks so much for being on the show. Um,
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
it's so fun to have you on. How did you discover this group? Because I feel like for a lot of people in America, Leader of the Pack is the first song and that's it. For most people, that's like the only song they really know. So how did you get into them?
Well, I didn't really hear. I mean, I may have heard Leader of the Pack at some point, over the course of my life, but I didn't kind of register in any way. I really got into them in the early '90s when I was working in my the second of many record stores in Melbourne,
Cool.
and um, and at that time in the 90s there was and in the 80s and 90s in Australia there was a very big 60s thing going on, so there was a lot of uh, Australian bands that you might have heard of in the 80s, like the Celibate Rifles, Died Pretty, those kind of Sydney bands, the Wet Taxis. They really they really looked back to the 60s as inspiration, and a lot of them had really great organ, like quite 60s sort of sounding. And as part of that, I think the Shangri-Las have always been, had a degree of popularity with people who are interested in music and interested in, rock.
Sure.
But there was a lot of interest in them sort of at that time. But like, largely because I was, working in record stores, there's secondhand records coming in all the time, and there's, girl group compilations and stuff, and and that's when I really remember being quite captivated by them. So I did not experience them as part of their target audience in the mid 60s.
Same.
It,
Yeah.
it, it was many years later, like, 30 years later or whatever. But they, the recordings still spoke to me very powerfully. And I remember very clearly that I Can Never Go Home Anymore. I found that absolutely devastating
Mm.
in when I first heard it, and for many years later I couldn't listen to it without, it would upset me every time I heard it,
Sure.
because it was if you've ever, and I'm sure many people have. I mean, I'm sure many people in your audience have, had trouble with their parents when they're teenagers, and, perhaps been threatened with, like, losing their home, And if you look down the barrel of that and what that really means, it's incredibly upsetting and devastating. And I think that was really conveyed, very, very powerfully in that song. And that's what really got me hooked,
Wow.
was that the emotional impact of that song and other songs. And it sort of went from there.
It's a good segue because that song in particular, I think really exemplifies how deep they can be. And
Mm.
I never really consider them to be like twee pop, lovey-dovey songs. Like they had a couple of those songs, of course, but like the drama in their performances was always something that always caught my eye because I was like, this group is different, you know?
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
spend the first chapter or maybe the first couple chapters kind of like scrubbing the girl group thing off of them because they didn't fall into that image, or that idea of what an image could be. Can you tell me about what it was for you to write that chapter specifically and sort of lay it down as like concrete proof that this is a substantial group and not some bubblegum stuff or whatever?
Yeah. It I think it was really important to do that because I think the girl group terminology now, and I must absolutely emphasize here that when I talk about um, when I talk about girl group terminology, I'm not in any way denigrating any of the groups that are generally included in that category. You
Yeah.
know, and many of them suffer the same marginalisation that the Shangri-Las have suffered. So, when I started writing about the Shangri-Las, I thought it was really important to address this, partly because, and this is not just something I came up with. Mary Weiss was very, very adamant that she really hated being called a girl group.
Yeah.
And she didn't identify with that tag at all. So I was like, well, you know, okay, this, what is it about it that she really doesn't like, you know?
Yeah.
So I thought, well, you know, I need to sort of unpack this term, and I'd find out who coined the term, you know, like when it came into usage, and so I went looking for. I sort of assumed that work had been done. So I went looking for it, and to my utter astonishment, I couldn't find anyone that had really interrogated that terminology. I was like,
Unreal.
wow.
Unreal.
So then I spent a lot of time with at that time, you know, microfilms and
Jeez.
going through old copies of you know, Billboard and Cashbox and, you know, Melody Maker and NME and so like from you know, like sort of 1963 sort of onward, trying to find mentions of them and other, you know, groups. And to my astonishment, I found that that it wasn't. No one was talking about these groups as girl groups. They were included, you know, in, you know, they were maybe called, you know, vocal groups or rock vocal groups or rock
Right.
vocal teams or female vocal teams, but not girl groups. Like it
Right.
was definitely not understood as, you know, as a category and a genre in the way that we do now,
Yeah.
sort of post Alan Betrock's Girl Groups book.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this very interesting, and then I attempted to sort of, you know, locate when it really started being, you know, used in that way, and it seemed to be in the early 70s and by rock journalists.
Yeah.
Who kind of decided that this was a genre, and it was characterized by, you know, young women, many, you know, African American, and the songs were written by professional songwriters. Many of them had a sort of a well-known producer that was like shaped a very identifiable sound that they had, and this was this was the byproduct of all of this, was that the singers themselves became really marginalized figures, like and like oftentimes people didn't even know the names of the individual group members, and you know, the first Shangri-Las album is a classic example. It's like got on the back, you know, their first names are mentioned and the colors of their hair,
Right.
and like, you know, not their surnames, and then produced by Shadow Morton, you know.
Right.
So yeah, it's yeah, and I think that this is this whole idea of girl groups has been central to marginalizing the Shangri-Las and other female vocal groups in the rock canon, in this little corner that they sort of belong in.
Yeah.
So we don't consider them, you know, along with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and, you know, the Kinks or the Left Bank or whoever, you know, who were their contemporaries and who were the people that they were playing on bills with and who they regarded as their comrades, you know.
Contemporaries, yeah, right.
Yeah. So yeah, so I think I think it was really important to unpack that and say, following on from, taking Mary Weiss's feelings about this terminology seriously, which it's kind of amazing. So many people are like, the Shangri-Las, Mary Weiss, she's so great. And then like proceed to just completely ignore the fact that like she really hates being called a girl group
Right.
and like and use that terminology in interviews. It was quite astounding to me, really.
And it's funny you mentioned, well, it's not funny, but it's interesting that like you mentioned how, the Shangri-Las had like a songwriter and a producer and they would go out and perform and do the songs. And it was almost like the uncool thing to do. But meanwhile, I'm a huge Beach Boys fan. And by 1965, 66, those guys weren't playing on those records. They would sing, but they weren't playing the guitars and the drums and the bass like
Huh.
King Crew were
Yeah,
doing. So it's kind of like,
no one cares about that.
right, no one's saying anything about that, but it's the boys club, it's okay kind of thing. It's like, oh, it's, a really sort of crappy look at the music industry. But when you listen to their performances though, they are just as powerful as anybody that was writing their own stuff. And a great interpreter knows how to make the songs themselves. Like Roger Daltrey never wrote those songs in The Who. Pete wrote them, but he
Right.
sang them
Yeah.
all. So it's like, it's one of those things. But you mentioned
Mm.
Shannon Morton because before, and he's a guy that there's just like I feel like there's nothing to know about him. Shadow's a great name for him, and you illuminated him in this book. There was so much context to his backstory and the groups he was in, what he did after the Shangri-Las with Janice Ian and Vanilla Fudge, and he really went on to do some other cool stuff after the Shangri-Las split. As you were doing the research for this book, what was kind of like your biggest surprise about learning about him? Like, because he was kind of a mysterious figure, and there's a picture of you with him. So you get to meet him, which is cool. But like, what was it like to chat with him, and any sort of special thing you learned from him about his story?
Well, I met him actually quite early in the piece, and it was just look, it was the unfortunate sort of byproduct of living on the other side of the world and being in New York for a, a couple of months and having to take the opportunity to meet with him when I could.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I met him in 2007. I'd only been working on this for a year, and a bit at that point. And so I had to take. I wrote to him on MySpace. That's how
oh,
long ago. Yeah, he had a MySpace profile that he managed himself, and he used
what?
to like sort of chatting. Yeah, he used to like chatting with people, and I
What?
wrote to him on MySpace and asked, and then he sent me an email, and then we corresponded by email. But the initial contact was on MySpace, which is hilarious. But so anyway, the point of all this is that I met him quite early in the piece, and if I'd met him later, I would have asked him a whole set of different questions
I can't even
because
imagine. Yeah,
yeah, but look, he was very he was sly and roguish and very charming, as you
mhm.
can kind of see in that picture.
Right.
But we spent, like he took me to his favorite like hangout in Hell's Kitchen, Joe Allen's, which is, I think, where a lot of theatre people
Hmm.
used. And we talked for 4 hours. So he just, and he went off on his tangents and kind of talk, but he was very gracious and he was very excited about the idea of a book. At that stage, it was like a PhD that might turn into a book, whatever.
Right.
It was a bit unclear at that point, but he was, he was very happy to talk and very happy to, I get the feeling that he likes, likes hanging, likes having, women hanging off his every word. Um, yeah, he did let a few things like, I mean, he's got a narrative, you know, he's got a narrative that like is repeated with minor variations with like, you know, everyone that he does an interview with.
Right.
So, and you know, part of that is, you know, this consistent downplaying to the point of denying it of his like earlier musical work, which is just like totally like totally incorrect. And people have bought that like for years. You know, he's been telling people, you know, that he's, and I look, I'm not like, I'm not I think there's possibly a few motivations behind that. I mean, the obvious one is that it makes him look like a genius if he just like, found these like incredibly talented young women and, you know, sort of threw a studio session together and wrote a song on the way to the, you know, the studio because he didn't have one. And
Great. Yeah.
it and I think all of that is true. Actually, I think that he didn't actually have a song and he wrote it on the side of the road. But the reason that he was able to do that was because he had a good 6 years worth of experience writing songs
Right.
and, you know, and recording in studios. And you know, he was getting his singles were getting reviewed in Billboard and Cashbox like
Cool.
really positively. Like that is not like, yeah, they were on, you know, independent labels, except for the first two, which were on like RCA. Talk
Right.
about like stuff at the
Huge.
top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And it's like
Love
it's
it.
like he wasn't operating in some just sort of local, you know, recording, you know, local records that didn't go past
Like a
like,
regional
you
kind
know,
of thing. Yeah.
yeah. No, he was very obviously like he had a trajectory that he was on, you know. And so, you know, all of his denials are just like, you know, patently ridiculous. And the people who have just, you know, swallowed them uncritically kind of look a bit ridiculous as well.
Sure. Absolutely. And speaking of stories, he's had some great stories about the Shangri-Las from back in the day. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you is because the Shangri-Las have always had, I feel there's two camps. There's the people who say they were the toughest girls on the streets. You know, they had all they were saying the bad words all the time. They were getting in trouble. And then there was the group that says like they were really shy and they projected this image because it looked cool and it sold. Like, where do you kind of feel all of that sort of finds a common ground, if there is one?
uh yeah, look, I think they were all of those things, you know.
Yeah.
I think they were they I they look, it's hard for me to say not knowing them, but like from
Yeah.
from all of the you know, the stuff that I've read. And I mean, they were precocious, funny, naughty, um you know, swore a lot. I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of interesting, the whole toying with the sort of female juvenile delinquent thing, you know, with like, because, you know, uh, to be a female juvenile delinquent, you would date a male juvenile delinquent, like a leader of the pack type guy,
Right.
you know. And you have a situation where, you know, the group has been getting, you know, a bit of notoriety around Queens and getting a bit of attention, and then they meet Morton, and you know, they get signed to Redbird, and it's all starting to happen. And then Betty finds that she's pregnant,
Yeah.
and and that event has defined so much about them, I think, without without anyone really knowing about it, because obviously it had to be hushed up. It could have just, you know, blown the whole thing.
Right.
But um, but it made, you know, and I've mentioned this in the book. You know, it made the group custodians of this huge secret, and the people that they work with as well, that 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 must have, for Betty and Mary Weiss particularly, made an already very difficult situation at home. They lost their father, as very young children. Mary never met her father.
Right.
He just didn't come home from work one day, had an accident at work. The family was plunged into poverty. So there's already, like, a great deal of stress in this kind of this household. And
Right.
then a sort of unwanted teenage pregnancy into that as well. I can't imagine, like, how like, emotionally, financially, everything, like, complex that must have been. So I think, Mary has said on countless occasions that she had enough pain in her to make anything, believable.
Yeah.
And so all of this is happening alongside, them being cheeky, precocious, hilarious teenagers. It's all happening at once, because
Yeah.
that's kind of how life happens. So I think they were all of those things. But what I really think they weren't is kind of girly, like, to, for want of a better way to put it. They kind of they they identified with a sort of a tougher kind of, again, for want of a better way of putting it, outlook and look and image. And it's interesting, because the very early publicity shots of them, they've got these kind of, like, nice white blouses and knee-length skirts, and they're
Dresses and yeah.
smiling,
Yeah.
and then within 6 months, you got leader of the pack, and they're scowling and kind of,
Like
wearing these,
groovy looking.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And actually, I think probably the earlier image is perhaps the more contrived one.
Sure.
Like, I think that the leader of the pack type look was kind of, yeah, more like how a greater reflection of how they saw themselves and how they behaved as well.
One thing I've always kind of thought to myself, but never have had like the verbiage to try to put together in a coherent way, is I always thought their name was almost like their safe space, because their world was so chaotic. Shangri-La means like a paradise, like a happy place. Like,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
all their songs were so painful. It was always like that's the place we can go to, like, to get away from it all. But instead, we're
huh,
thinking about it,
interesting. Yeah.
Um,
That's a great observation. Yeah.
yeah, it's just for a group with such a happy name, their songs were incredibly sad. Not all of them, but some of the really good ones. Um, the group breaking up in like 67, 68, after the singles for Mercury kind of stiffed. If they had gone on, where do you think their careers would have gone? Because those four singles they did, or the four sides for Mercury they did, they're cool songs. Like, they actually bordered on psychedelia in some way. Like the Sweet Sounds of Summer has like a groovy kind of passage throughout it. They could have very easily incorporated that, like, psychedelic bubblegum feel, but with a darker edge. They could have kept going for years with that throughout the rest of the 60s. Like, what do you think would have happened if they actually had sold those records? If the market was still clamoring in America anyway? What do you think would have happened?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. It's interesting, that, like, you you you've had, like, how do you feel about, like, Sweet Sounds of Summer? Do you like it, like, as a
I dig it.
song? Yeah,
It's so
okay.
weird.
Yeah, it's
It's
interesting,
so
because,
weird.
like, it's so what?
It's weird. It's just like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
incorporates what they're known for with sort of a sweet kind of sound, but then it gets real trippy, and it's like, oh, they could have gone places with this. Like, this could have been a whole new genre for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what they were trying to do at Mercury. I think Mercury were trying to kind of, like, throw a few different things and see if anything
Mix.
stuck.
Yeah.
But, like, kind of, but tying it into their earlier recordings. I
Yeah.
mean, the one Mercury track that I think is just astronomically incredible is "I'll Never Learn," which is written by Sandy Hurwitz, aka Ezra Mohawk, who was an extraordinary songwriter already. I don't know if you know the single that she released under the name Jamie Carter.
No.
Um, a year or two earlier. It's called "The Boy with the Way."
Okay.
It is out there incredible. It's like
Well, I'll check it out.
the
It's exciting.
she wrote it. The vocal performance is incredible. It's got this wild, this kind of brass explosion. It's nuts.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, in the best way. So
Yeah.
she was a really great singer songwriter, and like around the same age as the Shangri-Las. So I I don't know whether that means anything or not. I don't know whether that meant like enabled her to sort of perhaps see some sort of kindred. I don't know whether she even met them. I don't know how this song got to them,
Yeah.
but it was the absolute perfect vehicle for Mary. This kind of like chamber folk sort of arrangement,
Mm.
and a sort of a syncopated sort of uh, unsteady rhythm, and also like a vocal requirement that enabled her to sort of stretch what she'd traditionally been doing, which is like the long note kind of nasal thing that she did. But like this was a bit more like a different feel and a different sort of way of singing. And
Whole different pacing.
sorry.
Whole different pacing. That song's like a workout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and I think like that song more than any of the others is like an indication of what might have been,
Yeah.
and what if you I mean there's so many great like chamber folk rock records that are starting to sort of come out of the late 60s and early 70s, all of those incredible English groups, Pentangle, and but not that I'm saying that's where they could have gone, but like that's in the zeitgeist at that time,
Sure.
and that is just so where they could have gone, I think. And really and harnessing along the way that extraordinary emotional power that they
Right.
had as well. It's just that should not have been a B-side. That should have been an
Oh,
A-side,
absolutely.
and
I
oh man, anyway.
I love the What If game because it's just kind of like, I mean, like I'm a huge Beach Boys fan. It's what I'm kind of known for on YouTube, and that their story is full of what ifs. But
Yeah,
as
yeah,
much as I can see the Shangri-Las going down like a folky Baroque pop kind of road into the late 60s,
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
knowing that they recorded with Andy Paley in the late 70s, I can easily see them doing like a punk thing with no problem. And
Well, now this is really interesting because and just like going back to what you were saying before about the Shangri-Las, Shangri-La being a happy place and being where they could you know Andy Paley's description of those sessions that he did with them, that is exactly how he um, that's exactly how he describes
oh,
how singing was for them. He said
yeah,
that like at any point they could break into three-part vocal harmony, and he said it was just like they were really really good at it, and they just like everything fell away. They just everyone's smiling, and
yeah,
he said, if you told me that you'd found them on a street corner, like I would believe you, because he said they were just so great. He went on and on about how incredible just that those three voices together, nothing else, joy. So it was their happy place. I totally agree. And then he says they expressed interest in doing a show in 1977 when they were doing those recordings for Sire that never came out. They're lost apparently. I think they'll turn up at some
They're there
point, but
somewhere.
yeah, yeah. So he throws together a band that is largely the Patti Smith group, and they do a show at CBGB's, and Lester Bangs, Debbie Harry, the Ramones, they're all there kind of losing their shit, because
Absolutely.
and and passing the baton on,
Yeah. Yeah.
because because the Shangri-Las were punk precursors. They were they
Yeah.
had attitude, and they didn't want to, they didn't toe the line. They didn't, and all of those groups they looked to them, because
Yeah.
they saw something, of them in themselves.
I think they saw the authenticity. Like I always got the vibe from the Shangri-Las that whenever they sang, it came from the heart. Like something
Yeah.
real happened to these girls. The Shangri-Las, like when I got really deep into them, probably in high school, early college,
Mm.
because I only knew the hits, and I started hearing like the other stuff, like past, present, and future, or like uh, yeah, I'll never learn is a good one. It's easy to cry, like all these great songs that never got played on the radio. And growing, I was a kid in the '90s. I never heard that stuff growing up.
No,
Like,
no.
I was like, where did they bury all these songs? These are incredible tracks, and like, I feel like we've all been teenagers. Like we all have that experience of like the world is crushing you, everything sucks, everything is over dramatic, and sometimes, honestly, it really is. But I always thought that their expression of teenage angst and pain and yearning was just so real. I forget.
Mm.
I think it is Dressed in Black, where it's about like watching the guy on the street. She has to go back up to her room alone. It's like, and the song just ends. Like so,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
song just ends. There's no happy ending. It just like, well, it sucks again. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right.
which
Yeah.
obviously a lot of genres like emo would do years later. But yeah, I was gonna ask you another question about the '70s stuff. Like, is there any chance that that can have you heard that stuff? Has anyone heard that stuff?
No, no, I haven't. No, I look, um, I'm, I feel like it's around somewhere. I don't know whether Mary had copies of the tapes, or where they ended up, but
Yeah.
I she had said that she just didn't feel that the it was of a quality that she would be happy to release. But I don't remember her ever saying, "Oh, they're lost. They're kind of, we
Right.
don't know what happened to them." So I think that they're somewhere, and I think that at some point they'll turn up. I would say. I hope so. I mean, I would,
Yeah.
it doesn't it doesn't it doesn't matter, and when I say it doesn't matter, I don't mean that the quality of it doesn't matter or whatever, but I think there's not a commercial imperative now. They don't have to kind of be released to kind of make the money back for a label or whatever, it's
Historical
more
context.
about, and I think maybe how many examples are there of things that at the time it's been like, oh, this is this is not worthy of taking any notice, and then a few decades pass by and everyone's like, oh my god, this is
Yeah.
incredible.
Who's that? Right. Yeah.
Alice Coltrane, look at Alice Coltrane, in the 90s, in the late 80s and early 90s, you couldn't get an Alice Coltrane record to save your life, and
Yeah.
now, rightly, she's lauded as
Yeah.
this
Absolutely.
extraordinary. But so, my long-winded point is that she might not have been happy with them at the time, but like listening to them later, it sort of might be different. Obviously, she's no longer with us. Betty is, I don't know whether, yeah, I don't know. But like, I'd love to hear them. I'm sure that many others would as well. And, just for the sake of the historical record, it would be, really great if they were available in, some form.
It really would. And now Andy Paley's gone now too. So it's like,
Yeah.
there's some sort of collection of his work or something. Because where is it? When this came out a couple of years ago,
Yes. Yeah.
that was the
Yeah.
best sounding versions of their songs I've ever heard. And I was like, I did a review for it when it came out. It would be great to have another comprehensive set that includes those songs because I think for fans, it just adds to their body of work in terms of like how substantial and important this group really was. And I think
Mm.
historically contextual, like, hey, they got back together, they tried to do it again, but they weren't like, hey, this is up to like our snuff. Like it's probably cool, but we want it to be like really cool, you know? Um, and now that just Betty is the only one left. Do you know if she's still in New York or I know the whole band is so secretive, which they can have their privacy, of course, but like, what do we know about Betty now?
But I think the secrecy goes back to what happened in 1964.
Yeah,
And with Betty, this is like, it's just because essentially, Betty had to be disappeared out of the group. Mary had to take over at the age of 15, which, like, just let that sink in.
the kid.
And yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And like, and then just got packed off on the road and, like this kind of whirlwind, and then, Betty came back into the group and like came and went, a few times. And then when they signed with Mercury at the end of 1966, they signed as a trio
yeah,
without Margie Ganser, who'd had enough. So that was just like the three of them. But um, but I think that secrecy, and then I think that played out through the entire time of the group's existence. And then later, when Marianne died in such tragic circumstances, and that for various reasons was seen to be needed to be covered up as well.
right.
So I think all of the and that sort of secrecy has been kind of maintained
Yeah,
since then. Yeah. And I mean, it's the whole reason that I couldn't get any. No one was interested. Well, obviously the Gansers had been long gone by the
yeah,
time I started working on this, but Mary made it very clear to me that she would not be doing any interviews with me and not cooperating with the book. And I mean, that's fine. That's her prerogative.
right.
I respect that. Yes, that meant that like it was it became that shaped how the book ended up being, obviously, because it would have been a very different book with anecdotes and family pictures and things that they might have shared, but they chose not to, and that's fine. And I think that's largely because of Mary taking on that role at a very young age of being her older sister's protector,
Yeah,
and essentially not wanting anyone digging around and finding out things, which kind of is sort of you can get away with that pre-internet, but like after that, and when genealogical records start becoming available online, and the historical record is is available in a much more in documentary ways. Like by documentary I mean historical documents being available. And I just,
Right.
I just thought if there were many times when I thought, oh my God, I should just abandon this, should I even be doing this, And then but what spurred me on was, that I really believed utterly, to the point where I devoted the best part of 20 years of my life to it, that they really needed something that did their work justice,
Yeah.
that they needed to be, monumentalized in some way. And, a book is a good start for doing that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, what really spurred me on was that I was just like, if I don't do it, someone else is going to, and very possibly without, the care and empathy that I have really strived to bring to the book, and the historical, accuracy. And because I'm a trained historian, there's umpteen pages of notes and bibliographic references in the back of the book. And that
Yeah.
is because I everything is documented. You can see where I've got every piece of, information that I have, incorporated into the narrative.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not, I'm not making anything up. This is like, it's not about me, it's about the evidence, and
Yeah.
it's about what the evidence says. So I think it was very, very important to do it in such a, rigorous way. Hasn't made everyone happy, but
I
I
mean,
think some people think it should be sort of, chattier and funnier and kind of like,
no,
but like,
that's what drew me into it because I'm the same way with what I do with my reviews. I put care into it, I put empathy into it. These were human beings that made something, and
yeah,
I care about what I talk about because I care about the people who did it. So that's what caught my eye or my eyes the most about this book was like I felt the passion in this thing and I felt the
mm-hmm.
care for these people. And it's funny because like, a lot of these people will never meet. But you get an
Yeah,
idea who they are through their songs and what they present and what they don't present. And the second I started reading this thing, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm in. Like I understand like the care and the thought and the effort because if someone's gonna write something about somebody, it has to be done right. And you absolutely nailed it with this one because it's not
oh,
like
thank
a
you.
drama book. It's not like the overly funny stories. It's like here are the facts.
Yeah,
Here's what happened. This book has to exist for future generations to enjoy and learn. And especially for a group like the Shangri-Las, as far as I know, there's only one other book, like 33 and a third series about the greatest hits album. Like I think that's it. So
yeah.
I was in LA a month ago or so, early July, and I remember hearing a little bit about this book, but then I saw it on the shelf at this record store I was in called Book Soup in Los Angeles, and I
Oh,
was
great.
like,
Yep.
yeah, first time there, great shop, super cool. Book Soup, there you go, free plug. And I was like, oh my God, a book about the Shangri-La, I have to get this. And I started reading it on the plane, which I never read on planes. And I was sitting there like, just, oh my God, look at this pictures, this pictures. Never saw that before. Um, so
Oh, that's great. That's
I was
great.
blown away because I've been a champion for the Shangri-Las for a while too, and it's cool to see that something exists that you can hold and we can tell people to go buy now. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's great. That's great. And it's great to hear that, the book is reaching its target audience in that way, that you walked into a shop and saw it. And yeah, that's great.
it's so cool. Well, I got one more question for you, Lisa.
Yeah.
Kind of a big one. Kind of I don't know how you want to take it, but like,
Uh-oh.
what do the Shangri-Las mean to you?
Oh dear. Um, well, yeah, they've meant different things to me over the last like 20 years or so. Well, actually more like 30 really, since I first started listening to them. But like now, I it's they're they're really an integral part of my life now, you
Yeah.
know, because I've spent so much time with them and their music, and trying very hard to to do it justice, and to really produce something that really makes people think differently about them, you know, and makes and like I really wanted to, you know, reframe the narrative and just say, look, you know, there's not one way to think about this group, you know, like if we just remove all of the traditional what has become the accepted markers of authenticity in rock, which are, you know, that you write your own material, you perform your own material, and it's kind of, you know, it's the outpouring of your sort of inner emotion, self-penned, you know, and that is kind of like, and, you know, and the performance of said on instruments, you know.
Right.
So that's really become an like unquestioned sort of understanding of what it means to be an authentic performer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we go back to, you know, the markers of authenticity at the time that the Shangri-Las were making their records, and this is very clear, you know, on the back of their first album, the liner notes. The writer of the liner notes makes it clear that her understanding of what makes the Shangri-Las authentic is that they can perform live, and that they are great live performers.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a kind of long-winded way of saying, you know, that we need to go back to looking at how they were understood at the time that they were performing, and
Right.
not projecting these ideas that came back later onto them, you know, which is part of the, you know, the dismantling of the girl group thing.
Right.
So so I think that's really important for understanding just how great they were, you know, and for elevating the strength of their performances to something that is regarded in a more in a more important light. And that's, you know, that's what I tried to do, is just like peel away, you know, like the kind of layers of dust on a painting, you know, and just like, let's just look at what's here, and
Yeah.
look at, you know, look at the recorded legacy that they left behind, and, you know, and what that can tell us as well about about them and their emotions, and, you know, other, you know, societal indicators, you know.
Yeah.
And just I really, you know, the book really makes a case for them being taken seriously as artists, you know, and which is like, which, you know, I don't think that they have been traditionally regarded in that way, because of all of these like ideas about what girl groups are and what they aren't, you know.
Right.
So that's why, you know, so, you know, the Shangri-Las for me, you know, they're still, you know, obviously I've spent so much time listening to their records that, you know, I don't that much now, but
Yeah.
I still, like, there's certain, like, past, present, and future just slays me every time. Out in the Streets does as well, Dressed in Black, you know, just these extraordinary songs that I really, really felt had not been given their due, and these performers who were just dealing with so much, you know, like, it's in many ways like a you know, overcame like extraordinary difficulties. I mean, none of them were, they didn't have rich parents bankrolling their kind of musical endeavors. They did it all sort of from scratch themselves, and
Right.
and like there was no roadmap for them. They would just
Oh,
like send off on the road, and like they had to just like learn to perform in front of like, it's one thing to do a sock hop in your local, like, at your local school. It's another
yeah.
thing to like, be on Shindig or kind of performing like on the Dick
Beatles.
Clark Caravan of Stars. And, like, I mean, it just like, I, and then you have these kind of, rock guys in the 70s kind of going, oh, well, they're not really, they're just like, they've got no real musical ability. They've got, it was all the producers and the songwriters. And, this coming from people who've, never spent, a week on a bus, doing one-nighters, and it's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Unreal.
Um, but yeah, I don't know if that answered the question about what the Shangri-Las mean to me. A lot, like, and it really, look, it was for so many years. It was all I ever wanted to do was to get this. But just like, sorry, I got my post-it notes. It was to get a book out, and I must thank my fabulous publisher Steve at Verse Chorus Press, who um, uh, first agreed to publish the book like 5 years ago. And because I worked full time in an unrelated field, I,
Yeah.
was doing all of this on nights and weekends, and it took a long time. And
Sure.
then my mother died last year, sort of as it was kind of about like just getting ready to come out. And it's been a very, it's been a very long, arduous process. But um, every person like you who finds it and and digs it and like gets something out of it and understands what I've tried to do, that's the whole reason I did it. That brings me really great joy.
I mean, you nailed it. Like it's one of the coolest books I've read in a very long time because I'm always a champion for the underdog and like
Yeah.
represent people who need to be represented correctly and properly. And this book
Mm.
is awesome because not only is it just about them, you put so much context into how the world was like at the time and what was going on politically and just people in general. Like you make the 60s come alive to show who they were and how they interacted with that world and their own world at the same time. Um, but I can't recommend this book enough. Like I've been, like I said, a Shangri-Las fan since I was a kid. But being able to hold a book now and read it and look at it, and there's pictures, like the pictures with like the Sonics and stuff. Never saw that before. So
Oh,
um,
Ginny Delacho. Oh my
oh,
goodness. Like,
huge Sonics
yeah,
fan too. Yeah, super cool. Um,
yeah.
but Lisa, before we wrap up here, where can people find you and where can people find your book? Is there a certain link that you have, or do you prefer like the big machine Amazon, or where can people find your book?
I have the easiest way to find me is I've got an Instagram profile that is Lisa underscore MacKinney underscore author, and there's a link tree in there that has a whole lot of different buying options depending on where you are. But in the US, we recommend bookstore.org,
Oh,
which is an online platform that all of the profits go to supporting bookstores.
oh,
So
love it.
we really love that. So yeah, if you go to bookstore.org, um, you can find it there. But like if you Google it, it's so Dressed in Black, the Shangri-Las and their recorded legacy, you'll find many online buying options.
Oh, that's
And
great.
there are, and it is available in selected bookstores around the place as well. I'm not exactly I'm not exactly sure. There's oh and I actually can't remember the name of it, which is terrible. But there is a bookstore in Brooklyn that has copies,
Oh, cool.
um, which I could maybe get the name and send to you later.
Yeah, because underneath this video where people are watching, there's links that they can click on to find you, find the book, find the
Oh,
websites.
okay.
So
Yep, yep.
they'll see all that underneath, so no problem there. But Lisa, it's been an honor to chat with you, and I just want to thank you so much for writing this book. And I'm happy to spread the word about it because I think a lot of the people who follow my channel will dig this book a lot. So, whatever we can do to
Oh,
spread
that's wonderful.
a lot of hard work went into this, and it shows. So, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all your kind words about the book. And I'm so glad that that you appreciate it so much. And like I said, it brings me great joy. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, everybody. Go follow Lisa online. Grab a copy of her book. You will not be disappointed. And if you have questions, put them in the comments below, and we'll do some answering, and we'll see you in the next video. See ya.